of Fire is the biggest expansion I think they could have done so far. Obviously, I've not hit Icebrood Saga or End of Dragons yet, but this is one of the defining moments in Guild Wars 2's history because it's when they actually brought mounts into the game. This was really difficult for me to sort of accept in an MMO world, is that it took several expansions and big things before mounts ever arrived. Of course, with the updated user experience, I got a mount at like level 20, the Raptor, as I started the base game of Guild Wars 2. But those original players went for years before they brought mounts in. It was one of the defining, changing characteristics of the game. So obviously we're going to focus a hell of a lot on the mounts. So I want to get some stuff out of the way in Path of Fire before we get to the mount system because it's such an incredibly big deal. Let's talk about Path of Fire in general, what changes they made from Heart of Thorns as their next big expansion. The first thing was the getting away from the vertical nature of the zones. I adored this. Yes, the vertical nature of the old zones is fine. You can get used to it. It's okay. It's annoying. It's annoying. Instead of going to these vast open worlds, which we got in Path of Fire, was so much better. Oh my god, I could see where I had to go. I wasn't getting confused all the time. I didn't feel like I needed to be like, okay, you have to go around here to circle back around here to then go down here and do blah, blah, blah. And I know some seasoned players are like, that's because you're a noob. Yes. Yes. I'm new. I'm very new. I haven't played it for years. I haven't spent hours and hours and months in some of these zones, so I've learned all the intricacies. I'm here to enjoy myself. Yes, I'm a noob to the game, and I totally appreciate this because what it did is it showed that they really had to consider the mount system coming into the game and how people could enjoy it much more. That was such a huge focus in the zone design, and it gave away to having many more little puzzles, especially the mastery points, which are now hidden everywhere, and you can see them, but you can't get them. And that's because you don't have the correct tools in the toolbox yet, and you will later. And that led to me spending hours, because if anybody's ever watched me play a game outside of YouTube, I have a stubborn streak. It exists, and sometimes I will spend an ungodly amount of time doing something because it's doable. But if I'd just gone and done something else for a couple of hours and come back later, it would have like taken me 2 seconds. But I also enjoy that challenge. That's what it is. It's the Mythic Raider part of me. I love that challenge so much. Oh, I don't think so. I don't think so. Oh, it's bloody close, though. It's bloody close. Widespread. The whole zone layout was full of mystery. And I loved that because I could see everything and I could spot all these things. There was mystery everywhere. There were portals just dotted about. Didn't know what they did. I've seen them in different parts of the early game, but again, you do not have the thing to make this happen. And now there were loads of them, which is exciting for me who's going through these games blind, because I don't really know until I maybe see the trailer before we start and things like that, what each expansion offers. For example, one of the biggest things that I saw in the earliest days of Guild Wars 2 was a boat. People were going around on boats. And logically, that should mean that I'm getting the boat relatively early, because there's flying mounts in the game. Obviously, I've seen that. There's all these other things that exist, and a boat is a relatively, comparatively simple piece of tech. But I don't have it, and I don't know when I'm going to get it. It lurks, and I see it, but obviously with Path of Fire, I'm expecting to see that there. So the whole zone design, bringing the mounts in and making it much more horizontal, much wider, much larger, allowing you to enjoy that. So good. An immediate change, a quality of life change that I appreciated immensely with Path of Fire. Now, the characters, though. As I said in the Living World review, we're very established now with our team. We're Dragon's Edge, Dragon's Knife, whatever we want to call them, the Scions of the Seventh Dawn, the same sort of thing. This team that is our collaborative NPC team that guide us through the story. We love some of them, we hate some of them. But they're established now, and now we're along for their ride. And they're free to add in these extra characters that we can do something with, and you can actually invest some time into developing their characters. And Path of Fire, all about Balthazar and dragons and gaining dragon power and all those kinds of things. There are a few characters that really stood out for me in a huge way. The first one, and this is where I think ArenaNet probably missed the mark, is whether they thought these characters would be a miss or just a little side thing. And ultimately, I was left a little disappointed in a couple of these. The first one was actually the Herald of Balthazar. You meet this character almost immediately as you start the game. And the Herald of Balthazar is this big, powerful woman who fights you and is tough, but occasionally stops and just runs off to murder civilians. Brilliant. That is brilliant. It's visual. It's showing me. She doesn't need to go, I'll murder everybody in this town. She doesn't need to do any of that. She just does it. And she does it repeatedly throughout the story as she invades places. She brings armies and she runs around. She just mercilessly, cold blood, murders everybody. Oh, Jesus Christ, she mad.
Getting healthy.
That is a really cool entry.
This thing targets civilians.
I've doing it again!
You waste your energies fighting a god. Join him and fight the dragons instead.
I love this character. She's great. God, kill them all! Ah!
I need a moment. Might makes me...
That's a character I can be like, I want to kill that character. I can visually see the ramifications of this character. This character is sinister and evil without having to be all Skeletor about the whole thing. It was a real shame. They killed this character off very, very quickly. And I was like, oh, that was more important to me than many of the other big characters in the story was what the Herald of Balthazar was going to be. I was hoping for kind of a large-scale boss fight. Didn't really get that. Similarly with Aurine's brother, Mr. Vlast. There was a lot of rumor mongering about the brother lurking out in the sands, protecting people, a friendly dragon that was out fighting the good fight, and you meet and he dies within about 30 seconds. I was like, oh, okay. Now, there is some more storytelling happening here via memories that are dotted around the world, which is great. But yeah, ultimately, it was just like, I'm Vlast, and I'm dead, and out of there. And again, another character I kind of wanted to just spend some time with. Aurine probably wanted to spend time with. In terms of the overall story, would have loved that. This was my introduction, though, to a meme that has been building for quite some time in my live stream chat, which is about a character called Joko. I didn't know what Joko was. I had no idea what the hell Joko was, but when Path of Fire started, the name Joko started to resonate amongst the people. Joko is coming. Joko controls all the world. Joko is the most evil creature that has ever existed in my entire life, and God, we can never align ourselves with Joko. So when it came to a choice in the first city as to who we would like to side with, or how do we get enough of an army together to defeat Balthazar, I turned down Joko, and it was nice to see that RPG choice in there. I've no doubt it just plays out identically either way and gives you a bit of extra dialogue, but either way, I decided against teaming with Joko, mainly because my chat was like obsessed with Joko. Praise Joko was happening everywhere. Praise Lord Joko. And a lot of other big-time Guild Wars 2 streamers started to arrive to see the joys of Joko. I did meet Joko. I met him in a sort of afterlife scenario. You know, I'm glad Ritlock's not here.
Where I am.
Ritlock could just let this guy out.
I got here.
You died. It happens. Welcome to the domain of the lost. I am, of course,
You're Joko?
Joko.
Oh, boo!
I'm sorry, I don't know that name.
Liar. All who take breath know me. I am King Joko, the Inevitable. The last primeval king. Joko the Undying. The scourge of Vabi. Joko the feared. Joko the beloved. Joko, the eternal monarch of all. How dare you claim to not know who I am?
This was one of those moments that kind of fell flat for me, unfortunately, because of my newness to the game, where you get to see a lot of characters that have been loved and lost over the years. Traherne and Tybalt, all these people in ghostly form, trapped and ensnared in the afterlife. But of course, for me, they died, you know, a few days ago, a few weeks ago, whatever. So it didn't land as much as I would like to have to. I'm pretty sure that if I had been, you know, playing since the launch of Guild Wars 2, this would have been kind of a memorable moment. It's similar, maybe not, well, no. It wouldn't have been as strong as Endwalker, for example. It wouldn't have hit that hard, but it still would have been a nice moment, but it was still pretty cool. And this is where I met Joko, who I'm pretty sure is based off Murray from Curse of Monkey Island. Chris, insert Murray here for reference.
You may call me Murray. I am a powerful demonic force. I am the harbinger of your doom, and the forces of darkness will applaud me as I stride through the gates of hell, carrying your head on a pike. Stride? All right, then roll. Roll through the gates of hell.
This was a odd one because of all. I thought it was then a meme, which made a lot of sense. I thought they were just memeing on me. Is that this guy's the all-powerful and he's kind of just a talking, chattering skeleton in a cage, powerless and silly, and kind of jokey and I will end you. That Skeletor style is like, but I have no power, and so on and so forth was going on with our boy Joko. So I kind of get it that it was just like, he's built up as this all-powerful, undying Death Lord creature. Yeah, he's just a kind of a twerp that's trapped in a cage, and he's kind of useless. Of course, we then had Balthazar. Balthazar is a great villain, much less over the top than Scarlet that we've had in the past. Not a dragon, which was a cool aspect. Guild Wars 2 is all about dragons, big nasty dragons, and they were definitely in danger of falling into the cycle of like, well, it's new expansion, which dragon is it going to be? Let's just pick an element and throw another dragon in there. That's where I was how I felt about the story. And Balthazar was a really good change of pace because, one, his motives and stuff were understandable. Loved that. I could understand him even though he's a baddie. But as I've mentioned several times, we're kind of the baddies too. We're not the best people by any means. And I really enjoyed near enough everything with Balthazar. I thought he was a wonderful, wonderful character. I liked every evolution of him. I liked his presence. I liked his heralds. I liked the fights against him. I really enjoyed everything about Balthazar. I think he made a wonderful villain for the story. The story did have some flaws, though. I think that's to be fair. In fact, I'll just focus on what I thought was the biggest flaw, and I'm sure this will resonate a lot with the Guild Wars 2 community, was the revelation that Rytlock, one of the more fan favorite characters in the Guild Wars 2 story, freed Balthazar from his eternal damnation because he asked and he wanted a sword. It was, without swearing to get demonetized, it was absolutely goddamn stupid.
So then, my blade. How do I get it from such a terrible beast? And how do I get out of here?
You want the sword? I can give you the sword if you release me. Release me, Rytlock.
You would help me get my sword? Okay. You're not a bad guy, are you? It's mine, once again. Thank you, kind stranger. Have a wonderful day. We go to war!
See you soon, Rytlock. See you soon.
What a wonderful guy. I hope he has a great life.
It was so ridiculous. They played this cutscene of Balthazar being imprisoned, quite clearly imprisoned in damnation, and Rytlock's like, oh, okay, I'll help. Okay, yeah, sure, no problem. It's like, why are you trapped here? Who are you? Any of these questions would have been pretty good questions to ask somebody who has been locked into eternal damnation. Rytlock apparently, no, I want a sword. I'm going to go get a sword. It was so dumb. It was so dumb and out of character that it really just made me feel like Rytlock can never be trusted to open a can of beans. I would rather send a 2-year-old to do some of the jobs that Rytlock wants to do. I think it really hurt his character, which I think is a big, big shame. But there were some wonderful gameplay moments in this story evolution of Path of Fire. The Withered training is what I would call it coming from World of Warcraft, but controlling a bunch of NPCs and brainwashing them and then utilizing them in some way, a little mini challenge of trying to keep them all alive was fantastic. But of course, gameplay, so including the final battle was actually very starkly contrast to a lot of Guild Wars 2 stuff, was very, very memorable. Of course, with the reveal of Kral Katoric at the end, the return of dragons, and just how monstrous and villainous that character is. There was I would say easily, in terms of story and setting, Path of Fire has been my absolute favorite so far of Guild Wars 2. It really took everything to the next level. It fixed a lot of the problems of the past. It made a couple of blunders, for sure, but overall, fantastic, including the meta events, doing the race, especially with a mount focus expansion, doing a race around the areas and all that kind of stuff was fantastic, but mainly the mystery. having so many things as I played through each zone that were like, I'm going to come back to this later, I'm going to come back to that later. Of course, as we described in Heart of Thorns, I've learned how to play the Guild Wars 2 expansions now. They're not about leveling or anything like that. It was pretty good. But let's get to the big thing, which is the mounts. So, it became very apparent in discussions leading into Path of Fire that a lot of people relished in delight that Guild Wars 2 was different than the mainstream, different from where World of Warcraft was, different from where FF14 was. And one of those big features, of course, was the lack of mounts. You had to traverse everywhere by foot or by warping to an area and then walking to where you wanted to go. Create a slower sense of gameplay that a lot of people very much enjoyed. And there was some in the community, which is going to happen. I want to point out, from our research, it doesn't look like there was a lot. There's always, no matter what change comes into a video game, there's always some quantity of people who are viscerally upset about the change, even though the mainstream really doesn't care, or in fact, quite the opposite, is very happy to see it in. So we did some research on when mounts were announced, and yes, what we could see is a lot of people who were angry that this core feature, as they considered it, of Guild Wars 2 was going away. And they're just joining in with what the other games are doing. It's like, we got to have mounts now. And they were like, oh, I like that there's no mounts. They're going to spoil it. They're going to ruin it. How is this going to work? Not happy about it. Whereas other people were like, finally, oh my God, I hate walking everywhere and doing all those kinds of things. You know, all that kind of stuff was just a nightmare. But overall, I actually thought the response to the announcement of mounts when Path of Fire was announced would be considerably worse than what it actually was. A lot of people were pretty level-headed about the whole thing. But ArenaNet did such a clever thing here. Not only do they give you your first mount almost immediately. Now, of course, it was the Raptor. I've had that for a long time now. But they also immediately, and I mean within seconds, show you how it's so much better than World of Warcraft, Final Fantasy, or any other MMOs with mounts in Skyrim and whatever. And they nailed it. They nailed it. For years now, people have been telling me how good the Guild Wars 2 mount system is. And it is the basis of things. When Dragonflight was announced for World of Warcraft, it was a very big deal that this is basically Guild Wars 2, etc., etc., etc. So I was very curious about this system. And they made a lot, in fact, universally correct choices in introducing this mount system. Because, of course, if you've not played Guild Wars 2 and you're following along in this adventure, all of the mounts have unique abilities. Now, if you're a World of Warcraft fan or an FF fan, that's not really a big thing. You might get a different mount special, which is a different animation or something like that. But in Guild Wars 2, they have practical usage. For example, the Raptor mount that I ride around in can jump extremely long distances. It can hop from place to place. Short hops, but also very, very far. It has a stamina system. It can also crash down on top of enemies. Instead of just dismounting, you could crash into enemies and spin your tail to stun them as you get into combat, allowing you to dive into the combat and then crash into them, and your mount will spin and stun things. And then, of course, you have the masteries, which enhance their abilities. So for the Raptor, for example, as you level it up, it will be able to jump further. It will be able to regenerate stamina better, things like that. So it can become a more customizable mount. In the immediate introduction of the Raptor mount, they give you the Raptor mount. Now, of course, I was a little unimpressed because I've had the Raptor mount since level 20, but I've not been able to upgrade it. The mastery system actually doesn't come until Path of Fire. But they then give you a great city that you can jump around on. Very quickly, they're like, look what it can do. And you have to do it. You have to, and you're like, oh, okay. Look what it can do. Look at how good the Raptor is. And the way they did the mount system in Path of Fire was basically every zone gives you a new mount. And then there are hidden mounts, secret mounts. So we'll get to that in a second. So the Raptor was a really nice acquisition. And of course, I said the much more horizontal widespread zones allowed for you to utilize these jumps in a number of incredible places that suited the Raptor style. They did a great job of making you enjoy this, and you very quickly do start enjoying it. Now, well, the big change for me, of course, was having multiple mounts. I've only had the Raptor for... This is the third expansion on top of Other Living Worlds. So a very, very long time, I've only had the Raptor. And I was ultimately very surprised after, like, the base game and probably the first Living World is that I hadn't unlocked any different skins. I hadn't been given any masteries or anything. I just had the base Raptor. But the second one was the Springer, which is a bunny rabbit, which can jump extraordinarily high. Again, these mysteries came in because all through the zones, I'm seeing these like points and things that are really high up that I just simply cannot get in any way, shape or form. And they did the same thing again that they did with the Raptor, is you go to a village where they care for them, they raise them, they do all those kinds of things. And then you get one to rent, essentially. You can rent a Springer to do the missions in order to be given your own, in order to acquire it. And I was like, this is pretty cool. This is really, really cool. I enjoy this. And then suddenly I got the masteries for it, and it changed the entire game for me. And I am not downplaying that. It changed the whole game. Once I got the Springer, that meant that mountains were no longer an issue. Literal mountains. It meant that when I walked into a temple or something like that, I looked at it with fresh eyes. Is there a ledge I can stand on? Because that means I can put my Springer on there and maybe I can get really high. It unlocked so many choices for me. And the next mount that I got alongside that was called the Skimmer. Now, this is the final required mount. That's it. So the game only gives you 3 of the many, many mounts that are in the game. It only actually requires you to have 3. And the final one is the Skimmer, which allows you to not fly, but glide very slowly. You can't get elevation, but you can go over toxic rivers and things like that. You could do a slight elevation, like it's very much like a whale in how it travels, and it's got a very large turning circle. And this is where you start to notice that they very, very intentionally give the mounts extremely good pros, but also cons. Because what they didn't want, and I'm very curious how this plays out involving the flying mount, is they didn't want you to be a one mount kind of guy. They want to make sure you utilize all the abilities that the mounts have to offer. Now, the Skimmer is useful in certain scenarios, and I found it very useful later on in certain adventures where I could use the Skimmer. But what it unlocked to me is something that I didn't realize how good the Guild Wars 2 mount system is until they put in a mission, a little side fun activity, which was to race around a zone and meet certain checkpoints, essentially. They were scouts that were out, but they're checkpoints. And they built this race to involve every single type of terrain you can imagine, so you had to utilize all of the mounts to do the race. And this is where hot swapping on and off mounts really shined, because no other game that I know of can do it like this. And it was the biggest flex I've ever seen. You'll start on the Raptor to jump across a river, swap to the Springer to get up top of a mountain, glide down on the Skimmer, swap back to the Raptor to get across some crevasse, and then do the same again and skim down and then go across a river and then hop back up onto a bunny. And because there's no cast time with the mounts, this means you can actively do it without being inconvenienced. And it's wonderful. And I saw at that point, that's when it kind of, it dawned on me. Yeah, like I was getting these cool mounts, and again, the Springer changed the entire, how I looked at the game. The Skimmer didn't really do that, but once I got into this environment where I could actively utilize them all and find all their functionality mixed together in a seamless way, where it wasn't like stop, remount, things like that. Incredible. Utterly incredible. Absolutely incredible. And they couldn't have nailed it any better. And it really was the highlight for me. Probably of Path of Fire's gameplay mechanics was actually the mount system like that. But it doesn't stop there. Because I got to the final zone and I completed the story and I couldn't do certain things. And this is where that mystery comes back in, right? And the mystery was the portals and stuff around. And that's when I kind of got the clue from my chat, I'll be honest to them, is they were like, well, there are hidden mounts. And I'm like, what? There are more? They're like, where are they? Not telling you. Which is great. My chat is wonderful. They want me to experience it legitimately. And so I did. The hunt was on. The hunt was on because one of my goals with all the Guild Wars 2 content is to complete the content before we move on. Which means I needed to find at least 2 hidden mounts somewhere in the game. And this is when it was like, press M, open that map up. Where have I not been? And so I made some logical assumptions. One is that there was a zone that didn't give me a mount. A toxic sulfuric wasteland that didn't give me a mount. So there's a very high chance there's a mount there somewhere. And so I headed out into that zone and I'm looking around and I'm like, what could the clue be? And obviously I've got thousands of people Pefe laughing at me to try and find it. But I did notice a rather interesting looking structure that was like floating high in the sky. And I was like, a good place to start. So after trying a few failed areas, I spotted this building and off I went. And lo and behold, after some finagling, which I'm pretty sure I did completely wrong, I managed to climb the tower and it was where the Jackal was. Give me my Jackal. We're almost close to finishing this mastery. I would really like the level 4 mastery before we start leveling the Jackal up. Oh my god! Oh! Frigging ridiculous.
You have the look of one ready for a great
Don't buy
challenge.
the mini. There it is.
Perhaps you have
Jackal.
what it takes to master a jackal.
And the Jackal has Blink. For you WoW players, it has Blink. It can teleport a very short distance and a very fast recharge system. So I found the Jackal and acquired that within about 10 minutes of actually finding the building. Nice and easy. But that's when it changed entirely, didn't it? Yes, it did, because that's where they were like, there's another one. There's another one. And I'm like, well, shit, because I've finished all the zones now. Where could it be? So once again, I open the map and I'm looking around to any little area I've not been before. Now, there are going to be some people listening to this who are seasoned Guild Wars 2 players who probably check their inventory every now and again, who are going to go, you did what? But this is what I did. And I guarantee you, and the VODs exist, I did this entirely blind, but I accidentally found it. After a lot of searching. And I also realized about 3 hours later that is absolutely not what you're supposed to do at all. But essentially, it made sense to me that there must be somewhere on the map where it exists, because that's what happened to Jackal. And so I'm going on the hunt. And I did. I scoured every nook and cranny. I ended up going through, so I found some hidden jumping puzzles. I found very secret mini-bosses. I found all wonderful things that were not the mount until I eventually, I believe, I have to double check, but I believe it was the very last or second to last area of the map that was covered in any way. And I bunny hopped to the top of a cliff. I saw a platform and there was the Griffin, the flying mount. Now, not the flying mount. This is, again, pros and cons. It does fly, it flaps. But I'm going to give a shout out here to a wonderful person who's been helping me since, called Weeping Willow in the Guild Wars community. It can fly once you've got all the masteries and things, but you have to be very, very good with it. Think dragon riding, but you need to be really, really good to make it work. And I am not really, really good. But either way, I found the Griffin and an achievement popped up. This was the first time I'd really had to take part in one of the bigger features of Guild Wars 2, which is achievement acquisition. And this is how Guild Wars 2 does most of its grinds, are achievements that you need to achieve, and they will then unlock things for you. Now, up until this point, of the months I've been playing Guild Wars 2, I have not had to do any of this stuff, or at least nothing that was more than a few minutes work. The Griffin was the first time I had to take part in a proper Guild Wars 2 grind. And I didn't know where to start. But thankfully, I had some knowledge that we'd acquired, such as using the wiki. So I wikied the achievement, and lo and behold, ArenaNet has directly linked into the game guides for doing this stuff should you want to do it, including map locations, coordinates, teleport points, things like that. If you want the full walkthrough, you can do. So what I will tell you is I found the Griffin completely on my own. I referred to something that I did wrong. Throughout the zone, while I'd been doing the quests, I had been dropping clues in my inventory as to where the Griffin was. I never check my inventory in Guild Wars 2. In fact, it's a colossal nightmare, and it makes people upset to see it. I clear it out once every few weeks, once it's really full. But essentially, I had all these clues as to where the Griffin was, and I never saw any of those. I stumbled across it. But I did use the walkthrough in order to acquire the Griffin. It was extraordinarily expensive, and I did invoke streamer privilege. I'll never lie to you guys, and someone just sent me the money. You do have to buy some items from vendors, which you're supposed to go and grind out in order to acquire that gold. I have obviously not done that because I started the game recently, and someone just sent it me, so I did get that bit for free. Don't hate me, it's just the nature of the beast. And people obviously prefer me to do the gameplay of the grind rather than just grind money. So it makes a lot of sense. So that's what we did, and I got the Griffin, and I'm awful at it, because I've run into a situation in Path of Fire where we got, I want to cap every mount's mastery, because their last level skills are really good, such as the Springer jumping super high, the Jackal being able to go through all the portals, which I can now do, which was awesome, because it unlocked a lot of jumping puzzles. The Skimmer can go underwater, I believe. I still haven't acquired that, and that was kind of the nature of the beast, is I needed to do a lot of mastery filling in order to get all those things, and I acquired the mounts faster than that. So I put the Griffin on the back burner for now, because I want to do them in order, and then we'll get that stuff along the way. But in conclusion, guys, Path of Fire, wow. Literally, wow. What an extraordinarily good expansion. It's hard to find fault in it other than like slight story bumps. And that's it. That's literally it. Everything else I did was phenomenal. Absolutely phenomenal. And I know there's still more mounts and stuff for me to get as we move forward in this, including the Sky Scale, which people keep laughing at me as well about. I think that's probably going to be considerably worse than the Griffin. But goddamn, it's so worth it. And I kind of conclude on the same message I've put out since we played a bit of Guild Wars 2 is, if you're into MMOs in any way, shape, or form, and you are like dipping on Guild Wars, I just think you're fucking yourself. Honestly, I think you're screwing yourself. I really do. I know some people look at UIs and things, they're like, you know, it kind of looks... I don't understand what's going on, is always the classic one. You do after like an hour of gameplay. Once you start playing it, you're like, oh, okay, that makes sense. And it's not a perfect game by any means. Like, I still detest the inventory. There's still a lot that I think needs fixing, for sure. But in terms of where they're going and the path they're taking throughout their story and stuff, it just gets better and better and better every single time. And now I've got to experience what people keep telling me about the Guild Wars 2 mount system. It's phenomenal. It destroys other MMOs in terms of how it's working. And my concern now is that there is an actual full-fledged flying mount in the game. And I'm very concerned that that's going to take that away from me. And it's called the Sky Scale. So we'll be getting there at some point for sure. And hold me to this, because that's one of the big things I want to think about. Thank you so much for listening, ladies and gentlemen. We're onwards to Living World Season 4. And of course, our next video will be on the Raid Wings. We have, as of recording this, there's Wing 7 is all that remains. So we'll be covering 4, 5, and 6 in our next video. Thank you so much for watching. Bye-bye. Fat Cat Apocalypse! What kind of shaped hands are these for?
It is a bit weird.
What? Oh, I hate being taught sometimes. So that's as far as this goes.
Okay, we've got sort of a shoulder.
Yeah.
I think this is the best we're going to get. Oh, we got it though.
I think so. Ow! Punch myself in the face.
So I think once your head's in, you've got space, right?
Alright.
Oh, it's good. It's good though.
It's annoying I can't see it. I think that's it. I think we're at max capacity.
I think so. Holy shit, really. Okay. Oh, the legs aren't good, dude. I can't. How do you feel on this majestic mount?
I can jump so far. Ready?
Yeah.
Raptors, baby.
Raptors me.